A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, at magandang gabi. Wherever you're located and whatever your time zone is, welcome to our Chronicles. This is Rita Gadi. For today, we are moving away from many of the concerns that are on the table because right now we have our president who is in Singapore. He has just addressed the Asia Summit and has also invited other investors, private and government, to come to our country for investments in many aspects and in many ways also. And he has mentioned how the Philippines has gone over several of the obstacles that may have occurred because of the pandemic that has invaded many countries throughout the world, and especially like a developing or a developed country like the Philippines. So be that as it may, we are not really discussing these concerns, but we are going to some island in our country which is so important for many of us, one of the biggest actually. This is the island of Mindanao. And the title of our program, as perhaps you would be reading shortly, is The Masks of Mindanao. So why do I have this as a title? For many, many years, there have been a lot of interest, not only with what is happening in Mindanao, but also because of several incidents that have occurred, way back in the 60s even, where there has been this secessionist movement and so forth. Now, I am going to talk about this before our guests will be invited to join us. As I have done in the past 4 years when we had the Rita Gadi Chronicles, I will speak of certain issues of which I have first-hand knowledge, of which I have documents, and of which I know the personalities involved in that particular issue or issues. So when I speak, for instance, of what has happened to our island in Mindanao, and so far as a secessionist movement is concerned, an independence movement as it was also called, and all the other episodes that happened after that, historical and otherwise, it is also coming from that particular platform that I know personally what happened. So whether this is part of historical knowledge or memory, this is how I'm going to relate the story as I have lived through it firsthand. So let us begin, for instance, well, I was not there when Islam came to the Philippines in the 14th century. This was because of the trade routes from the Middle East, passing through several other countries until it reached the edge of the Asia mainland, and then through the Indonesian peninsula, and then down south to Sulu, the Sulu archipelago, as you would call it. And that was where Islam was first brought into our country. That was in the 14th century, or even much earlier, as they say, 12th, 13th, 14th. The exact date, we don't really have that much of the historical record, except for the etchings that we could see in the first mosque that was built there. And of course, in the records that they would also have from that time. And from there, it must have spread in several other areas, from Sulu to some of the places in Mindanao itself, the main island. And if there is actually several other historical records, then you have, for instance, the 10 DATUs that came and then landed in the Panay Island. And then all the way as it reached, as several of them also established their sultanates or their datuship in the island of Luzon. You had, for instance, Raja Sulaiman in the banks of the Pasig River with one of the biggest kingdoms. And it was that particular kingdom that Raja Sulaiman burned to the ground because he knew that the Spaniards under Legazpi was already arriving, and he would not want them to see the glory and the grandeur of the island along the Pasig River. And then, of course, we also have the stories all the way up to Pangasinan, where you had Princess Urduja. Up to this day, of course, she is still mythologically or historically or part of, or historically, as one of the queens and princesses that established also her own kingdom there in Pangasinan. That was Princess Urdua, still recognized and still honored up to this day. So many of these episodes where Islam came to our country, but I'm going too much in the past, of which, as I said, I do not have first-hand knowledge. Now let's get to this period where we already had the beginnings or the stirrings of some unhappiness, if you would call it, if that's a mild term, but some movement that the Muslim communities did not seem happy about how the political system is occurring as far as Mindanao is concerned. So let me go back to that time. This is, as I've said, my first-hand knowledge. Okay. In Kidapawan, which is my hometown, we had, my father had established a little hospital, Rita Gadi, as you'd call it. The next town going on the way to Cotabato City is Cabacan. And after Cabacan, you had Pikit and Pagalugan. These are the two municipalities that were, at the time, controlled by the governor of the whole province of Cotabato, which is now about 4 provinces. But that was still the biggest province at the time. So you had Udtog Batalang, DATU Udtog Batalang, who controlled the area as far as Cotabato was concerned. And of course, his relative, Salipada Pendatun, who was also in Congress and later was in the Senate. So these were the politicians of that time. And this is the time that I say I can speak on first-hand experience. So what was it like? Well, sometime in the 1950s, it was President Ramon Magsaysay who said that Mindanao is now open for the people of Luzon and Visayas who may want to settle in the island. And that was where that idea of homestead was brought about, so that you could claim the land that you would settle in, as they say, as far as the eye could see. And that was where we had the influx of many of the islanders from the other islands entering Mindanao. That was the that area, 1950s. And so it went around that, from Pangasinan, from the Ilocos region, from the Visayas, many settlers came. So that was where my father also settled in Kidapawan. He would have wanted to settle in Parang, but then he saw the beauty of Kidapawan. It nestled in the foothills of the Mount Apo ranges. Mount Apo is the highest volcano in the Philippines, about 10,000 feet. And that is also in the middle of the mountain ranges, stretching for about, a little over 9,000 hectares, all the way to the Davao provinces. So that was what my father saw. Kidapawan, a beautiful place. It was cool because, as I said, it nestled about 3,000 feet above sea level as it was then. That was it. That was the way it was. Settlers coming from the Visayas and Luzon settled in Mindanao. Now, what happened there was we had those areas controlled by the Muslim governor. They belonged to the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party is one major political party at the time. Those of you, this generation today, perhaps you would not remember that anymore. There were only 2 political parties in our country, the Liberal Party and the Nacionalista Party. The Nacionalista Party at the time, we had a President Magsaysay, who was a Nacionalista, and then, of course, many of the other governors and mayors of towns and cities belonged also to that party. But as far as Cotabato was concerned, together with the Lanao provinces, they were controlled by the politicians belonging to the Liberal Party. So you had in the Lanao provinces, you had the big names of the Alontos. Senator Dumocao Alonto was a member of the Philippine Senate at the time. He was in the Liberal Party. And then you had Rashid Lucmad, also governor of Lanao del Sur. He was also in the political party of the Liberals. And then in Cotabato province, you had, as I said, Udtog Batalang, also in the Liberal Party. And then you had Salipada Pendatun, congressman and eventually senator. He also belonged to the Liberal Party. At the time that President Magsaysay was the president, a nationalista, and he was the one who opened Mindanao for homestead claims from all of those coming from Visayas and Luzon. Be that as it may, what happened was we still had the feudal system as far as the Muslim communities were concerned. So you had to belong to the royalty, to the royal class, for you to be able to claim leadership. You had to be a Raja, a Datu, a Sultan. So you had, for instance, the royal families, the Rajabuayans, the Sambulawans, and you had several others of them. I just don't have all the names right now, but anyway, that was how it was. So you had Datu Udtug Matalam. He also belonged to the royalty of the Matalams. And then you had Salipada Pendaton, also of the royalty. And the same too with the Lanaus. And then you had the island provinces, the Tausugs, the Yakans, all of these different tribes and cultural communities in the three islands of Sulu, of Basilan, and Tawi-Tawi. So that was how it was. Now, when the Christian settlers were actually already settled in several provinces in Mindanao, I can only speak of our area, which is Cotabato. And at the time, as I've said, it's the largest province in the Philippines. So what happened then was, when President Marcos won the presidency, President Marcos won under the Nationalista Party. So we had a Nationalista Party at the time, and that was the time that I settled also in Kidapawan. So what happened there was the ruling leaders or politicians in the provinces, predominantly Muslim, were in the Liberal Party. But what was happening? Well, in the Matalam area, he had a librarian named Hashim Salamat. But he was a very intelligent librarian. But he belonged to the lower class, or what you would call the peasant class. He was not part of the royalty. But many of these young, brilliant men were sent to the Middle East to study in the Islamic colleges and universities. And so they sent Hashim Salamat to study in one of the universities in Egypt. But while he was there, he got exposed to what was the beginnings of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, where there was this conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelites, or the Jews, who took over the Palestine country and converted it as a Jewish country and named it as Israel. So there was this conflict that the Palestinians felt that they were deprived of their original historical homeland when the Jews came in. This was after the Second World War when that happened. As a matter of fact, this was an edict of the United Nations. We were even a signatory to this, naming Palestine as Israel and now belonging to the Jews. So the Palestinians were deprived of their historical homeland, and they were relegated to the Gaza Strip and to the West Bank. And in between, you had several of the communities of the Jews. So talagang parang nahiwalay sila as a community, because the Gaza Strip was on one side and the West Bank was on the other side. And you had to cross the Jewish territory to be able to visit your relative in that area. But whatever it is, that is how it was, that you had the Palestinians working and seeking for their own independence and their fight for seceding from Israel to establish their own territory, which was originally Palestine. Doon na-expose si Hashim Salamat. He learned and he saw that it was possible for a people to claim their independence if there is another, not just a religion, but another political system that will be imposed upon your original country, and then you could secede from that. So that is how the exposure was, that we are the Philippine Islands, but in Mindanao, you had some communities of the Muslims. And so naisip nga at that time that it was possible maybe to have their own territory. So that was the exposure of Hashim Salamat. And he graduated from his studies of Islam theology and all of these studies in the Quran and, of course, the Islam religion, until he became what what in our religion, in Catholic religion, he became some kind of a bishop, imam, as they would be calling him. So when he returned to the Philippines, he thought of this. And so he was lecturing in the mosques for every Friday, the way our priests, for instance, would be delivering their homilies. And what happened was he began to introduce the importance of how the Muslims could have their own territory within the territory of the Philippine Republic, in the same manner that he saw how Palestine was also fighting its wars of liberation, as they would call it. So yun ang umpisa, doon nagsimula yan. Paano ko ito alam? Bakit ko makikwento na alam ko ito? Sapagkat noong 1969, we were already, I was already teaching at the time in the local college, the Central Mindanao College of Katipunan. And we were already advocating for some kind of a federal form of government. Because you know how it was, we were so far away from Manila, parang yung central government, nakakalimutan na yung mga kailangan isagawa sa Mindanao. You know, for instance, like road networks, bridges, etc. As a matter of fact, sa Kidapawan, where I was residing, we had only Bailey bridges. That was one Bailey bridge that we had to cross if we were going to Cotabato City, another Bailey bridge on the other side if we wanted to go to Davao City. These were the centers, the mga urban centers noon at the time. So you see how it was. We felt that in Mindanao there was very little infrastructure and very little development that was occurring. So even at the time, even as I was teaching in the Central Mindanao colleges, we already had a group, both Muslims and Christians, who were advocating for a federal form. And Hashim Salamat happened to be one of those that joined us because we were going all over the province of Cotabato, because there was going to be a constitutional convention for 1970. Those of you who perhaps would recall in history, we had the 1970 Constitutional Convention. So we were the group that went around, and Datu Udtog Batalam's daughter, Bay Tonida, who married Midbantao Adil, assigned Hashim Salamat as my personal translator from speeches to Maguindanao and to other languages that was prevalent at the time. They assigned him to me as not just a bodyguard, but also a translator. So that was how I had first-hand experience and companionship and a very strong friendship with him, Hashim Salamat. And so we were going all over the different towns of Cotabato. In fact, as I said, we did not even have a road network. So to be able to reach the coastal towns, the coastal towns of coastal municipalities of Lebac, Calamansig, and all of these other areas, we had to go out into the Celebes Sea before we could land into these towns. Anyway, I'm just giving you a sideline on that, how difficult it was even traveling. So he was with me for, how long was it? Well, quite a while, as we were advocating, as I've said, all the amendments, not amendments, all the things that we wanted to include in the new constitution, because there would have been a constitutional convention. There was actually forthcoming that constitutional convention in Manila. So that was how it was, and throughout our travels, that was when doon niya kinwento yung kanyang exposure sa Egypt, sa Middle East, sa Palestine, and the movement to be able to how it was important na magkaroon ng sariling teritoryo ang mga Muslim within the territory of the Republic. Ganon din yung nangyari sa Palestine, within Israel, magkakaroon ng sarili nilang bansa, so to speak, yung tinatawag nga ngayon Bangsamoro, the nation within the nation, or something that could be translated informally that way. So that is my first-hand experience, 1969, 1970. Okay. At about that time, pumasok na ang administration ni President Marcos noong 1966. He was a nationalista, and the rulers or the political leaders of this predominantly Muslim provinces were liberal. Anyway, what happened was, wala na silang malaking connection sa Manila sapagkat ibang partido. But meanwhile, ito namang grupo ni Hashim Salamat, together with several others, yung mga kasama ko dyan, mga galing din sa mga royal families, sila Sandiales Sambulawan, sila Corocoy Moson, Musib Buat. These are big names as far as the royal families in our province are concerned. So yun din, nag-iisip na rin sila ng mga ilalagay sa Constitution pagka magkakaroon na nga yung Constitutional Convention. So I'm speaking of this first-hand knowledge because doon nagsimula the idea of seceding from the Republic of the Philippines or asking for an independence from the Republic of the Philippines for the Moros or the Muslims of Mindanao. In the Lanao provinces naman, ganun din. Because Rashid Lukman and Dumukao Aloto were also the Liberal Party na kakontra ng ruling administration party. So that is how the situation was. Kaya parang in a way nag-connect yung idea of seceding with the political clamor also of the political leaders na pansinin itong mga probinsya na ito even though they belong to another political party. So that was how it was. Kaya nagkaroon ng yung umpisang pagsabog ng mga Bailey Bridges nga doon sa probinsya namin, nag-umpisa yung tinatawag na Mindanao Independence Movement. Kaya yung pangalan ni Hashim Salamat, yang sila Hussein Pangato, lahat yung mga yan naglabasa na yan. Sapagkat doon nga nagsimula yung ideya na yan na magsisid. Kaya nalagay kami sa mapa na yung independence movement there was really part of what is now in the Bangsamoro law, that they would have the basic structure of their own government and a recognition of the legitimacy of the Bangsamoro together with the people having their own charter of their political future, and of course recognizing that this would be through the democratic process, etc. Pero ang nangyari ay nasuportahan sila ng mga ibang bansa outside of our country. Several countries gave support because there was this organization of Islamic countries, and of course there was the Rabita. Yung Rabita nila, yung parang yan yung College of Cardinals sa Catholic Church, na yan yung mga pare, mga arsobispo, etc. It's a more exclusive and a higher level of organization. So doon na-expose ang Mindanao or several of our communities there na gustong magkaroon ng sarili nilang bansa, their own independence, etc. So maraming other Islamic countries that gained assistance. Of course, sinasabi nga Malaysia came in also. Yan may interest din because, of course, our interest in Sabah was connected also to the interest of Malaysia to enter into Mindanao para tulungan yung mga Muslims doon to have their own territory na kasama na rin ng Sabah. So nakita ninyo kung gaano ka complicated it seemed at the time hanggang sa nagkaroon ng martial law noong 72. Ito na ngayon talagang sumiklab na sapagkat there were several other towns that were held by the Muslim mayors who refused martial law. In other words, kasi with martial law, you have to surrender your firearms. And you know, the saying nga in our place sa amin sa Mindanao, they will surrender their wives but will not surrender their firearms. So, nung nagkaroon ng talagang imposition ng martial law, ang daming naglagay ng mga karatula sa kanilang mga bayan, no martial law. So, nagkaroon dyan talaga ng conflict, violent, between our armed forces and the Muslims who were armed. Yan na yung umpisa, nung umpisa, ang sabi nga, the black shirts, ito yung mga Muslim, tapos yung mga Ilaga, which were the Christians, mostly Ilonggos, yung mga settlers doon. So, doon na nag-umpisa yung talagang gulo. So, you can imagine how what began as an idea to have their own independent government became a violent confrontation hanggang nagkaroon na yan ng MILF at saka ng MNLF. You had the names of Abul Khair Alonto in the Lanao provinces, Jimmy Lukman, he was his pseudonym Jungle Fox also in the Lanao provinces, and then you had Commander Rodi in our province in Cotabato, whose real name is Abelil Balajuk, but his nom de guerre was Commander Ronnie. So you had all of these young men, they were very young, and they were leading now the secessionist movement or the independence movement in their respective provinces. And then Miswari, who was an assistant instructor in the University of the Philippines, also left the university and went to his home province there in the three island provinces, where he also staged his own connection and linkage with the independence movement. So doon nagsimula yan. What people thought was cultural or religious became political until it became something that was already part of our, part of our historical episodes in many ways, kasi talagang ang laking gera ang nangyayari in several areas there. That was the Mindanao conflict. One of the masks that we have worn at the time precisely. So that is how it was. If I have to go back to it until several episodes again occurred, historical as they may be. Nung nakita na ni President Marcos na tumutulog na ang isang northern country sa Africa na hindi lang sa religious linkage but also with arms, ammunitions, yan na ang Libya. Si Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, napakayaman kasi ng Libya. And yung exposure, yung cause ng mga nais magsisid from the Republic of the Philippines, nakaabot na sa kanya. So dun the strength of his power came into Mindanao with all the supply of arms and of course, the support that he has given to the independence movement. And so what happened was, because of the exposure that Miswari had at the Islamic conference, kumalat na yan sa mga Islamic countries. At ang kanilang perception, actually, meron daw genocide dito sa Mindanao. Kaya talagang lumaki na yung mga gera-gera na yan at naging practically a big problem that the central government or our Philippine government had. But President Marcos had connections likewise with other Islamic countries who brokered for him that in order to establish some kind of an understanding of what's happening in Mindanao, you will have to talk to Colonel Gaddafi because he's the biggest supporter of the independence movement. So doon na nangyari na ang pinadala ni President Marcos sa Libya, sa Tripoli, ay si Mrs. Imelda Romualdez Marcos. Sapagkat iniisip niya na madaling makapag-usap ang ating unang ginang at the time para makwento kay Colonel Gaddafi that we do not have genocide in the Philippines and that the predominantly Muslim provinces, yung Cotabato, Lanao Sur, Maguindanao, wala pang Maguindanao at the time, just a portion of the province of North Cotabato, and then of course the three island provinces, Sulu, Basilan, and Tawi-Tawi. So that was the trip that Mrs. Marcos had to Tripoli. Kaya, anyway, as I've said, I can only speak of it firsthand and by experience, kasama rin tayo nung nakipag-meeting dyan sa kay Colonel Gaddafi. And then of course, from there, ang haba ng negotiations, etc. and all, but we were able to establish yung tinatawag na, ewan ko kung mababasa ba ito, Tripoli Agreement, baliktad yata, tama, okay, the Tripoli Agreement. So yan, ito yung dokumento, this is the island of Mindanao kung saan yan. The Tripoli Agreement actually encompassed 10 provinces in Mindanao. So hindi lang yung predominantly Muslim communities, but 10 provinces and 5 cities joined together in what would be called as the regional autonomous government. Yun ang simula at yun ang naging parang midway sa request nilang magsisid o sa request nilang maging independent. Ang mangyayari ay instead of granting them to separate from the Republic of the Philippines, they will be part and parcel of the entire Philippine Republic, but they will have their own regional autonomous government. Yan ang unang-unang naging regional autonomous government. Hindi hiniwalay ang mga Muslim community. Sama-sama yan. But there were conditions there that the executive, the chairman of the government would be a Muslim. The head of the regional assembly will also be a balanced representation from the Muslims and the other tribes and the Christians, etc., yung mga other natives of Mindanao. And then, of course, they would have their own procedure of how their own executive departments would be undertaking their own design for the kind of future they would have. Kaya, based on the Tripoli Agreement, nagkaroon ng madrasa schools, lahat ng mga eskwelahan that would be teaching Islam, not only as a religion, but as a way of life. The Sharia courts, where you had the implementation of the justice system in accordance with the Quran. And then, of course, you also had the banking system. You had the Amana Bank that was established. And then you had the Mindanao Development Authority, which also was part of the economic parameneda. You know, they had a Mindanao Economic Development Authority, which also prioritized the particular needs of Mindanao. Kaya doon nagsimula na yung building of farm-to-market roads kasi yung pinakamahalaga, at pagkatapos yung mga highways, etc. And then, of course, the bigger infrastructure, the airports, the seaports, the dams, and electrification coming from the Maria Cristina Falls, and the grid extensions supposedly for the entire island of Mindanao. So doon nagsimula yan, part of the Tripoli agreement, which was brokered by our government together with telephone conversations between President Marcos and Muammar Gaddafi. So ayos na yon. That was 1974, 75, 76. There was a plebiscite that was held in all of these towns and provinces, so that they would be able to find out whether they would want to be part of it, and it was actually approved in that plebiscite. So nagkaroon tayo doon, yaan, the regional autonomous government. However, then we had peace. But in 1986, President Aquino invited Miswari to come back to the Philippines. And you had former Senator Butch Aquino and former Senator, well, they've departed already. That you have Senator Aquilino Pimentel who went to fetch him. And so, iba na naman ang usapan doon. So, pagdating ni Miswari well, we had the island provinces there, the Sulu Archipelago, iba na naman ang lumabas doon. So, from there, we had several other things that came up, other than the regional autonomous government, etc. And then you had, now we have, first it was, they had several panels that were established and organized, parang peace panel, etc. Dami yan. Some of them are not even from Mindanao. But that was how it was until we came up, or the government came up during the time of President Duterte with what we now know as the Bangsamoro autonomous government for Muslim Mindanao. You have the island, the provinces of Basilan, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, Lanao del Sur, Maguindanao, and then of course some of our barangays, I think, in North Cotabato or thereabouts. And that is what we have today. But it is now supposedly functional, but there is also still a lot of obstacles coming in. And that is why I had to give that background, because that, as I said, is my personal experience, and that is what I know firsthand. Now we would like to welcome somebody coming from the island provinces, which is very seldom talked about. Almost all the while that we're talking about the Bangsamoro or the autonomous government, it has always been with the Maranaos or the Magintanaos. But we forgot the island provinces. And this is where we have a representative who is now newly appointed as the Secretary for Muslim Affairs, a good friend, and of course, someone who could enlighten us further on what exactly the masks in Mindanao should be taken off, and we could progress now as one united country. I'd like to welcome now DATU ALMARIM TILLAH. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sister Rita. Glad to be in your show again. Just flew in from the south. Unfortunately, one of our big town, the capital town of Bungao, Tawi-Tawi, about 1/4 was razed to the ground. That's why it occupied me, and I was just here in time for your show. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much and congratulations. I would like to extend, of course, our congratulations. And finally, you're there because, my goodness, there really has to be more attention to be given to the island provinces. And we still have to go through the effectivity of this law that we now know as the Bangsa Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao. So, how has it been so far?
Well, actually, as a student of history, I followed through from the rebellion to the signing of the peace agreement in Tripoli, followed by the Jeddah Accord, then the BARM. These are the three big series of agreements. And well, many do not know this. I think the best formula that was ever crafted was that of the late President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., having two regions, two separate regions, but under one kind of umbrella coordinating with each other. So in my discussions with former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Ray Puno, very knowledgeable about all of this and very intellectual, and I had compassion for the Muslims. In their proposed constitution under the Duterte administration was to have two autonomous regions, but under one federal state. And the late Senator Nene Pimentel, may he rest in peace, was always with us and has compassion for his Muslim brothers, crafted this piece of provision, which I included many times. And still, to me, the best formula, even up to today, is President Marcos Sr.'s formula. ORC, that was the Office of the Regional Commissioner, 9 and 12. 9 for the island provinces of Sulu, Tawitay Basilan, with the Zamboanga Peninsula, and the landlocked provinces of Maguindanao and Lanao Sur, with Cotabato as the capital. And that was a very good formula, vibrant, and we accomplished so much in a short time.
You're very correct there, sir, because you know how it is. We should be a united people instead of being a divided people, because what is happening now, it's really very weird that you have one province here, several kilometers away, another province, and then you have some of our barangays or some of our towns rather in Cotabato, and then you have the three island provinces where you're from. So, and then it is dividing the people even further because it seems that that government will operate only for these areas when it should really be the autonomy of the entire region, because that's what we need. You see how it is. You mentioned federalism. My goodness, Sir Al, we have been working on this since 1969 even. Already, but you know, that is exactly why it is not just, well, you mentioned Chief Justice Renato Puno, and as you said, he was so aware of this. Yes, indeed, we should have had it already installed in the Constitution instead of this BARM law. You know, I've talked to a lot of our friends there, and you know, some of them would say, I will never be under a Maguindanaon. And the other one would say, I would never be under a Maranawan. And I can imagine how your people in the island provinces would feel the same way, but could not just express this any other way. But you know, we went through war, which was absolutely unnecessary until we had, as you said, the Tripoli Agreement. And that is why I cannot understand why it was not implemented completely. It was already at the start, the beginning. I mentioned all the different inclusions of Islam as a way of life, not just for the Muslim communities, but for the entire regions involved, Region 9 and Region 12. Can you imagine to have a way of life where you could pray 5 times a day? A way of life where it is easy to arrange domestic problems without having to go through that process of annulment, etc., and all of this. a kind of system that you have the education of our children in one of the most one of the civilizations that we had that was preserved for centuries, where we have now inherited the best of the sciences of astronomy, of physics, of algebra, and all of this. That kind of system where there is no distinction from the leadership and the people, because you had the council that would advise the leaders that this is what the people want without having to go through a political system for that matter. That is what we lost in a way, because if we had that together with all other tribes, it is not in conflict with any religion, as a matter of fact, because it is a way of life. And that is precisely what we should encourage, instead of dividing us into a Muslim community, a Christian community, a Luban community, and all. You're so correct. Sayang, but we still have time. Secretary, we still have time. Yes.
By the way, Sister Rita, we expected the entire process, of going to the federal system of government implemented during the time of President Rodrigo Duterte. We supported him because of his stand and position for federalism. That's why he started the ball rolling during his Watts. And we are gladdened to know that no less than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, my good friend, my brother Ray Puno, was on top of it and assisting him among the members of the parliament or the membership of that commission was Senator Nene Pimentel. And they really crafted a very good and thorough constitution. And I expected this constitution to have been implemented during the time of President Rodrigo Duterte, because that was his commitment. Sad to note that in the last year of his administration, it only have come up with that constitution, but not implemented. But there's hope here, because our new president now, Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Bongbong, I worked with him for 6 years as his advisor consultant for Muslim affairs. And his advocacy is national unity, and which actually I antedated or preceded it by having our advocacy in Mindanao, national unity in diversity. And that is in pursuit also in parallel terms with the president's call for national unity. And what marching orders have had from the president mainly is to get our Muslim brothers together, despite of the tribes, political persuasions, and other considerations, to come together, and which I have been doing for the rest almost starting 2 years now. And we are hopeful and positive about the future of federalism in this country. And the president just spoke about it, I think, late August, early September, about federalism when he was with his son, Sandro, congressman. And I'm happy to note that we are now taking the step seriously towards it. And as I told the president, when we are in the Senate, if you become president, may Allah bless you, good health and guidance. Please start the federalism process. We now have that drafted constitution. All we have to do is form that group or get that group back together, and with the Chief Justice, I'm sure Justice Ray Puno will just be too happy to assume that role for the second time. And I have it as a timeline during his watch of 6 years that we will finally see the light of day, that federalism will be in place in our country. Because, as I said, I was informing President Duterte, and I have informed also the president now, Bongbong, when I was with him for 6 years, that the only formula to keep this country, our republic, intact, not dismembered, is by adopting a federal system of government. No other way, because you can never stop new adventures by young people who may not be contented with the implementation of such agreement from Tripoli, Jeddah, and now the Barm. Now, why two separate regions? Because we are far away from the seat of government here in Manila, even far away from Cotabato City, which is the seat of the Barm government. Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, Basilan, we are closer to Malaysia, Sabah, than even to Zamboanga City. So how can a region be clustered together and be brought closely together if they're far away physically, outside of the cultural, historical, and other economic, issues concerned. So the formula, as I said, and I would want to repeat it for the last time, that would have solved to its finality this issue would have been the Tripoli Agreement and the implementation of the Office of the Regional Commissioners 9 and 12. Now we are in one city, Cotabato City. Our legislators, members of parliament, come all the way from the island provinces of Sulu, and Basilan, Pasig, Zamboanga, before going to Cotabato City. And that's why even in this MSU issue, during the time of the late President of DAP and, of course, Secretary of Education, my Brad, Odi Corpus, my recent peace, I propose that the island provinces of Sulu and Tawi-Tawi, which have satellite, colleges of MSU, we come up with one kind of system tailored with the UP system, Western Mindanao State University System. We succeeded, but because of the lobby of private colleges in Western Mindanao, it did not become a system. It only became a university. And I hope this will be, restudied, brought back, and hopefully a system is the best one that can work in that island provinces of Sulu, Taytay, Basilan, in terms of the educational preparation of the young people. And Maguindanao and Lanao can cover the rest of the educational preparation of our young in MSU Marawi. So, as I said, the best formula was that of the late President Marcos. Many did not realize this, but following through since its inception, from the Triple Agreement to today, the BARM, it is still the best agreement. I don't know what happened in between or in the process, but it could have been implemented by letter and spirit to the end game, sort of facing in the autonomous structure. We would have had already a very effective federal system of government by then.
You're very correct there, Secretary, because you know how it was in the past, how difficult it was to get together to even agree on how we could be united. But I went in the introduction I had to this program, we were united. You know, when Magsaysay opened Mindanao for homestead and communities from the Visayas and Luzon settled, they claimed land, as a matter of fact, as far as the eye can see. But there was this, I think the conflict came when the titling was instituted. I remember how it was, our neighbors from Pikit and Pagalungan were telling me, because in Kidapawan, we were wondering why all of a sudden there was some animosity when there was none before this homestead thing. And they were so mad at Torrens. They kept on mentioning that they hated this guy Torrens, and they wanted, they were asking me how can we remove him, and how, because, and then I realized that Torrens was the Torrens title, because the homestead then was now being claimed as real estate property of those who settled there, and they had to title it. But in Islam, where you are located is the land of Islam. I don't think you title it. I mean, this is inherited, I understand, from one generation to the other. Like you have houses in Marawi where you had your great-grandfathers even, carved in the pillars, even their sayings, etc., and the quotations on the Quran. So that was really quite difficult when that happened. And that was where there was no explanation done. And that is where the animosity began. And that is why, as I've said, the exposure likewise of several movements outside Mindanao. I mentioned Hashim Salamat, who brought the idea of having an independent entity within a republic. And that was how the Palestinians were actually wanting to have their own Palestinian government within the Israel country. So if they succeeded, or at least what the movement was doing, that was what influenced Hashim Salamat to start this. I gave that Secretary TILLAH as a background, because that was when it started, that it became a little quite troublesome. But the politicians came in, and so they used the movement of Hashim Salamat for political ends to get favors from President Marcos. I think we know that as part of history, bitter as it may be for us to recognize this, but that was how politics moves, and how the bargaining sometimes happens, that political leaders would demand something so that they could be able to get something in return, and the people are forgotten. And so here you are now at this stage, realizing that at one time, not too long ago, because the Tripoli Agreement was sometime between 74 to 76, when finally you had lengthy conversations between President Marcos and Colonel Gaddafi himself, discussing the provisions of the Tripoli Agreement. And, we still have Secretary Ermita, who's still alive today. And if those of you in media would want to interview him, he, together with Undersecretary Carmelo Barbero, because Carmelo Barbero was the Undersecretary of Defense at the time. Carmelo Barbero, as Undersecretary of Defense, and his aide, Colonel Ermita at the time, went back and forth from Tripoli and Manila and worked together with the staff of the Secretary of State of Gaddafi. This is Secretary of State Dr. Al-Treki, to formulate the Tripoli Agreement. So those of you who are listening to me in media, you can interview Secretary Ermita regarding this. I speak of this as first-hand knowledge, having been in Tripoli likewise in all those occasions, and having had the occasion of how Mrs. Marcos was able to convince Colonel Gaddafi that there is no genocide in Mindanao. In fact, Colonel Gaddafi was surprised, because when Mrs. Marcos brought out the map, she showed him exactly where the Muslim communities were. Lanao Sur, some portions of North Cotabato, which is now Maguindanao province, and then your island provinces, Sulu, Basilan, and Tawi-Tawi. You see, sabi nga ni Mrs. Marcos, that is where it is only predominantly Muslim. And this is the whole of Mindanao. So you see, the Tripoli Agreement, as you said, Secretary Al, joins together all the people of Mindanao into this autonomous government, which should have been really more effective if eventually it would be the federal form of government. I think our president now, who ran under the federal party, realizes the significance, the importance, and the history of a federal form of government. So you're you're on good track. I think you're riding the good bus now towards that. Let's hope for the best as far as this is concerned, with of course the provisions of the Tripoli Agreement also taken into consideration. Both of us, I think, do not agree with the way the BARM was constructed, or the way it was organized. Because as you see, the government center is in Cotabato City. Cotabato City is not part of the BARM. But because you have a beautiful government center, and please, this is not carrying my own chair, but we designed it. I was there when this was being designed. And if you will open the capsule in that building, my epic poem on Cotabato is buried there, together with the first officials of the Regional Autonomous Government of 9 and 12, under then the executive chairman, Simeon Dato Manong, and of course, several of those in the assembly at the time. So we had the autonomous government at the time. So let's hope for the best. Now, let's go back to your office, Secretary ALMARIM. What are the priorities you have now under you?
Well, before my office or our office, the Muslim office in Malacanang, I just want to put a copy to the early historical accounts. Those who do not learn from the lessons of history are bound to repeat it at times with a vengeance. Now I can go to our office. This office was crafted by President Bongbong Marcos per my advice. In deference to the president, who was a friend, a brother for 28 years now, Rita. Many do not know that. We ran in the 1995 elections, the only ones handpicked by the late Ambassador Eduardo Bos Dandipuanco to run for the Senate. And since then, we were together especially in the plans that he has in mind, now not only anchored, but top with the presidency. And when he asked me for 3 positions of my choice in 3 different departments of government, I told him, Bong, I will just continue advising you on Muslim affairs, and which he did. And now his reminder for me, which he made earlier, is to get our Muslim brothers together and later for national unity. So the focus of the task of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Muslim Affairs is uniting all our Muslim brothers, respective of, party affiliation, ideology, come together for the sake of our people and, of course, for the country as well. While we are Muslims, Rita, we are also Filipino. And if this boat sinks, we'll sink together with it. So we have no choice. And now the prescriptions I've given the president, I have an 11-point agenda. I would want to mention just 2 for now. I'm sure I'll be appearing on your show, and it's the first time that I'm mentioning it, Sister Rita. I was mulling over and thinking deeply as to what may be my first kind of memo to the president, a very serious one. So I reflected, and I said, I and all our brothers out here in the society are free. But how about our brothers and sisters who are in the different, cells in the country? So I said, I must give them priority. Persons deprived of liberty, PDLs. So I started the ball rolling, and this is a product of more than 3 months of dialogue, research, discussions, interviews. And I'm very grateful to our Christian brothers who are in all these institutions. I did not get even one negative reaction. All were positive, and all of them were supporting this move, this historic initiative, which I did. And in the words of Justice Boying, Justice Mendimulya, he said, Gov, because all of them always address me, Gov, Governor. Sabi, Gov, walang nagpunta sa amin dito, any Muslim leader about this. And this is novel, and it has to be done. And I'm glad, because I articulated, before I go to the gist of this proposal, I said, on Christmas Day, the President pardoned some of our Christian brothers and sisters. Muslim more kami 20 million dito, walang programa ganon. So there must be a Ramadan executive clemency to be in place. And when this is done, it will not only spell well for uniting this country, for getting inclusivity here, but it will be a good public relations effort, and this administration under Bong will be long remembered by the Muslims. We number more than 20 million, and the 57 Muslim countries in the world. And this major master stroke That's why I had this as my first memo. Ramadan Executive Clemency. And many of them are, ill, very sick. Some of them, or many of them, have reached the very late age, and many of them are not even attended properly because even our jails are congested. And when I discussed it with Boying Rimulya, sabi niya, go, maganda ito talaga. So I started the process, and if I may continue on this, Mr. Rita, because our Muslim brothers and sisters all over the country do not know what this initiative is all about and how it will affect the PDLs, the persons deprived of liberty. So I started with my dialogue with the Executive Secretary, former Chief Justice Lucas Bersamin. I told him, ES, we call him Secretary, ES. I have this idea and proposal, and I sounded him off. He said, go, magandang ano yan, idea, and why don't you take it up with the Department of Justice? And right then and there, when I left his office, Allah is great. There was sitting on one of the chairs in the lobby, Crispin Remulla, going. I went straight to him and I told him about this. Immediately, he told me, Gob, it's a novel idea. Kailangan niya, pero maganda yan. He immediately called his department, and two of the undersecretaries were directed by him to coordinate with me. My younger brother, Jojo Cadiz, who is a senior undersecretary. Now we're together 6 years with Senator Bong then, and Deo Marco. Two of them assisted me placing it in terms of the technical legal aspect. So we started the ball rolling there, and I requested the Department of Justice through Undersecretary Jojo Cadiz to set my meeting with the Board of Pardons and Parole. My late brother used to sit in this board during the time of the late President Marcos and the Board of Pardons and Parole. And now I was addressing the board. And Dean lunch was prepared. All of them were there to address the board. And since the time I addressed the board, we had 3 meetings. And all of them assisted me, came together, and now they are now compiling all the names all over the country. I said this is not limited to Bucor, the Bureau of Corrections. It's for all Muslim women, men, our brothers and sisters who are in all the different, camps or jails from Luzon, besides Mindanao, and of course, Bucor. And they have a long and big task here, and they are doing it. And after that, I set through, again, the Department of Justice, very supportive of this. My meeting with the Bureau of Corrections, Bucor, Muntinlupa, with Director General Katapang. This is the first time I'm announcing it, Rita, over media. Alam mo naman, ang UM manages office, as in past offices, I manage by results, not by propaganda, not by activities either. So, General Katapang was just too happy to receive me. We were supposed to meet only for breakfast. It went up to snack, lunch, snack, early dinner. And there was this media lady who was scheduled to interview him, but he deferred it and requested the lady to come the following day. And after that series of discussions went over, 3 meals and 2 snacks, he got the total picture of why Muslim persons deprived of liberty must be given. Just like our Christian brothers during Christmas. It's how we depress
Yeah. Well, congratulations. My goodness, this is not only novel, it is very historic, Secretary Al. This is the first time that I'm actually hearing this, and how important it is for us to realize that, we have a community of brothers who need our assistance in this manner because they have been deprived, as you've said, of their respective liberties in a way that they should be attended to as, as expeditiously as possible. Wow. I don't know how else I could explain. I wish I could clap from here. But yes, it's a very good, it's a novel and a very historic uh, movement that you have initiated, and I'm so glad that you were immediately attended to by all of the persons who will actually be implementing this.
And then
Persons,
I
yeah,
committed
yes.
to support it and to help me, implement it once the president gives the imprimatur.
Very, very good. Yes, oh my goodness. And of course, we will try to mention this as often as we can so that this would be spread out to a lot of other people who seem to have a bias or a prejudice, insofar as religion is concerned. And now there is a specific attention to be given to them, especially in our justice system, because again, there could be review of the cases and all of this. There is also one thing that time and time again I've really toyed with this idea, Secretary Al, but there is the study of Islam, I
Yes.
think, which should be part of our educational system. We should not forget the fact that insofar as world history is concerned, there is this big contribution not only of Islam history but of civilization itself, and how much we have how much we owe to the preservation of many of the knowledge that we have today because of this. This is not merely to, this is part of the fact that we could be able to accept and to honor and to respect and to be proud of part of our heritage as Filipinos. As you said, it is not just the religion or the culture that should, that should determine who we are, but also the heritage of where we came from. And Islam as a religion should be treated likewise as a civilization of which we are a part of. And I think our children should be proud of that. And that should be a subject. I was just going over this very thick book, The History of the Arabs, and then the history of Islam. And then, of course, several other stories of the story of Muhammad himself is already one of that could be taught in our schools. This is not, many of the how do you call it, the sutras that you have there are such that you could really imbibe this in our everyday lives. I have such great admiration for this. From coming from the subjects that I sat in with Dean Cesar Mahul, that was where I really began to respect, to honor, and to love Islam as a way of life. And then, of course, with the late Senator Dumacao Alonto, my first Quran was the one that he gave me one time when I visited Marawi City already in his later years. And of course, in many other, my next door neighbor was his son. The late Alex Alonto was my next door neighbor in Quezon City. And from their family and all the rituals and all the practices they had, I was really part of it. Then, of course, my staying in Kidapawan and my exposure to the family of Datu Untug Batalam, as I've said, my very good friend, Bay Tonida Milpagtao Adil's wife, the daughter of Datu Untug Batalam, and my exposure to Hashim Salamat in those early stages of the secessionist movement anyway. So I'm glad that this is really being taken care of, Secretary Al, and we will broadcast this as often as we can. I have to congratulate you for such a novel idea, historic as it is. My goodness, beautiful too, in a way that
Sister Rita, I've been smiling when we were talking about education. You jumped the gun on me. The third is education in that 11-point agenda. So matter of fact, I just visited the office of our sister, Sara Duterte, but she was not, I think she was having another, appointment. So her staff attended to me, and precisely I gave them some pointers for what I want to discuss with her in great detail, and which includes what many of these things are mentioning about. I was mentioning about the madrasas system. I was mentioning about revising Philippine history to put in proper perspective the role of the Muslim in history. And not only that, to identify the historical landmarks, which was actually started by the late President Marcos administration, but never continued. also the historical sites and the heroes, the Muslim heroes in history. Many of our people, even our Muslim brothers, fail to remember that the Muslims were the last ones, first and last ones, and never, I think, subdued nor surrendered to all these colonialists from the Spanish conquistadors to the American period
To the
and
Japanese.
even the Republic in early years. And I think it's about time that the proper writing of history, which was initiated then but never continued, must be done. And when this will be put in proper perspective, this is one way of getting our Muslim brothers together with the national society. That indeed the majority not only respect but recognizes the role of the Muslim brothers in history. And that, I said, is number 3 in my agenda. But let me go quickly to the second one. It's very important, Brother Sister Rita, if I may. The second one is posting Muslim ambassadors to
Oh,
Muslim
yes,
OIC
yes,
countries.
yes.
There are 57 Muslim countries in the world today. And most of them, if not all, are oil producing. And in terms of trade, investment, OFWs, this is a big, contribution to our economy. And barely the surface of it has been scratched. And as I told the president, I said, I'll wrap up these domestic concerns of domestic, unity, unifying all our Muslim brothers and sisters in this region. Then I am ready to go off out of the country to visit the Muslim countries. And there are many good investments, very good opportunities in all these countries. I was in Saudi Arabia, working for a while. Saudi Airlines, a supervisor for technical publication. And during the period that I did not have any task, I visited the 3 national and international Muslim institutions in the kingdom. The Islamic Development Bank, even the World Bank, borrows money from it. That's how big it is. Because all the Muslim countries put in their bank, put in their finance or funds into this bank. Second is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation now, which includes all the Muslim countries. That's the political arm. And of course, the Rabita, which is
Yes.
the religion. But let me just focus on the Islamic Development Bank. When I had this discussion as an ordinary worker in Saudi Arabia, I set an appointment with the technical group of the Islamic Development Bank. And in our discussion, I asked them what were the opportunities for Muslims like us in the minority in a non-Muslim country. So I found out that there is a specific provision for education and training for Muslims in non-Muslim countries. I brought this up when Chairman Miswari was governor, and so with the investment mission, which I crafted when I was SP administrator, but it never took off. And now I will go back to that, and in my sorties to these Muslim countries, I start with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And can you imagine if only just for that, malaking tulong yan sa atin. And whatever is appropriated in terms of our not unlimited budget, appropriations can be, diverted to other regions that also need it. Because meron na tayo doon. And so that's the second task I'm imposing on myself, of course, with the support of the President, as I told him early on, that I'll focus on the great investments, even in terms of loans, walang interest.
Exactly.
Well,
Well,
go to the World
yeah.
Bank.
Well, Secretary, those are really,
Diba?
yeah, they're very good. They're very good.
Yeah, because riba or interest is un-Islamic.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
why do I go to Islam with so much interest? Why don't we go to Muslim countries or
Exactly.
Muslim brothers? We
That's
have 6
true.
million here.
Mm.
Kami yung yung PR ng gobyerno na ito.
Yes,
And
that was the idea of
Bongbong,
yeah.
and I was excited about it. He said, you went? Yes, of course I went into this. And so the
Okay.
first country of visit, Sister Rita, will be the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because of the three institutions. If we can only scratch the surface of the assistance they have for us, malaking bagay.
Yes,
To
very
have
good.
country
Well,
better.
I really would pray for all the best. Those are very good proposals, and I'm with you as far as pursuing all of this is concerned. Let me know how we could be of any assistance in all of this. But as you said, it's really just a matter of opening these doors,
Yes.
especially for us in Mindanao. So again, we're over time, Secretary Al. We're really running 10 minutes over our time, but that's good. Maybe we could have a second time that we could converse so that we could discuss in detail many of the proposals that not proposals, but the things that have to be done under your leadership. And I'd like to thank you for
Leadership
now.
of the president.
Yes,
Under the
yes.
leadership of my
But of
president.
course, yes.
The president.
Definitely. Yes. So thank you very much for having joined us. And we hope to have you again soon enough as far as all of this is concerned. And you could post your progress in all of this. So, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam. And before I leave, I would want to appeal to all our brothers, sisters, Muslims, Christians, to unite for the sake of the survival of this country. Thank you, Sister Rita.
Thank you very much. So there we have it, Secretary DATU ALMARIM TILLAH, who is now the Secretary for Muslim Affairs. And we've listened to many of the initial stages of his movements as far as his department is concerned. Again, we'd like to thank all of you who have joined us, and we will go through the messages and the comments perhaps. Yes, okay, so as fast as we can. Virgilia Villanueva, thank you very much to both. Yes, good afternoon also Dato Almarin Tila, good afternoon po. Watching from Germany, Jinky Bill, Unroll Sarof Nozbait, hi po Ma'am Rita, Lynn Mutasarco, watching from Bacolod City, etc., etc. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. This has been your Chronicles, and this is Rita Gadi.
Ba-ba-da-ba-dum,